Please be seated. A shoot shall come from the stump of Jesse. The reading from the Hebrew Scriptures opens with this peculiar and strange image. Maybe it's obvious to many of you, but I needed to look into it a little bit because this year, for some reason, this image intrigued me. Why does Jesse have a stump, and why does it have a shoot coming out? I'm a little slow. So it may be helpful to back up a few verses to see where we pick up in this conversation. The previous verses in Isaiah talk about the glory of the forest that will be destroyed. And write that there will be so few trees that a child can write them down. The tallest trees will be cut down, and the lofty will be brought low. We enter the prophet's judgment of the people of God at a time when the political situation they find themselves in is in stark contrast to God's longing for them. When their religious imagination in Israel is crying out for something new. It's a time when the prophet writes harshly about the neglect of the poor and the needy, the orphan and the widow. The prophet writes poetically and angrily that this mistreatment of the most vulnerable has caused a blight upon the nation, a blight caused by their own neglect, and that blight will spread to the very aggressors that perpetuated the mistreatment. As Israel has capitulated itself to the political whims of the world around it, its people have become more divided and prey to worldly motivations. They have forgotten what it means to love the Lord and to love neighbor. Historically, at this point, Jerusalem has become captive to Assyria, with Israel's people spread among their captors' empire. It's the beginning of not just decades, but centuries of captivity from different empires. For hundreds of years, this very text of Isaiah would be fine-tuned to highlight the plight of the dispersed people of Israel, people who are holding on to the hope that God still had a place for them somewhere. So our passage this morning from the Hebrew Scriptures opens with this scene of desolation, this scene of a decimated, of a lifeless forest, as a metaphor for the decimation of Israel. We don't have to look very far, I don't think, to identify with the prophet right now. Division runs rampant not only in our nation, but in the whole world. You can hear the groans of humanity crying out from the images of a dead Syrian refugee boy on the beach in what seems like ages ago, but was just a few months. Or another lifeless refugee boy carried in his father's arms as they sought sanctuary in this country. We can hear the cries of creation as the glaciers melt and the oceans rise, as the birds shrink in size and the fish disappear from the sea. Our forests are literally disappearing. It's not hard to identify with the prophet's image of feeling as if we are in a forest and the forest is burning. And it's burning fast. The story of the loss of hope is not new. The people of God have been here before. In the desolation, there is a lifeless stump that appears to be all that's left of the beautiful forest. O God, will you hear the groans of your people, of all of creation crying out? And from a stump, seemingly lifeless and apparently desolate, there will come new life, says the prophet Isaiah. This new life imagined by the prophet, it's not like the old. God's imagination is not like ours. The new life imagined by God as a response to the groans of creation, it's incomprehensible to us. Shall we let our wolves be prey? Shall we let the wolves wander over to stay with our lambs? Ridiculous. Will I let my child play with snakes? You're out of your mind. But God's love is so big that we cannot fathom the peaceable kingdom depicted by the prophet. It's unimaginable. What kind of peaceable kingdom do you yearn for? And if it's beyond our imagination, this peaceable kingdom, I'm not sure that the details matter that much. Because what matters is the belief that there's something bigger, something more than I can imagine or you. What matters is the promise of a vision that's beyond us. What matters in Isaiah's beautiful vision is that it brings hope in this desolate forest. Hope, the tiny shoot, tender and delicate, emerging from a dead stump in a felled forest. Hope that it can be different. Hope in the God who dreamed up the stars and the mountains and the lion and the lamb, that this same God has the capability to dream up a new ending than the only one we can see before us. Hope in the God who created humanity in all of our beautiful diversity, that there in that God, there is also the capability to instill peace in a way that just escapes us. The prophet does not call for the listener to create this peaceable kingdom. The prophet says that the anointed one, the one we wait for, will do that. But by instilling hope in a new ending, by planting a seed that a new tendril can unwrap its precious leaves from what looks like an old dead stump, that perhaps gives us strength to act differently. strength to keep going anyway. Hope itself changes things. Advent is a time to turn from despair and hope in an ending to this story that we can't otherwise believe is possible. Because with hope, anything is possible. I ran across a story this week of two unlikely people interacting on social media. I don't know if you know this, but social media is not a place known for interactions depicting the peaceable kingdom. In it, an angry parent of a trans boy wrote to a well-known gender non-binary model named Rain Dove. The conversation opened with the mom's projection of anger directed towards Rain. "My child is sick due to you." I'm not sure how I would respond in that situation. I might likely just ignore it, but Rain responded to each successive comment with compassion and with empathy, saying things like, "How are you feeling about this? Does it feel heavy? And for you to be reaching out to me about it shows that you must care about your child's well-being and happiness." The mom's attacks continued, but they diminished in veracity, saying things, moving from things like, "My child hates her body because of perverts like you," to, "Why would my child do this to herself?" Rain continued to ask questions about the child, affirming the mom's love and concern for the child, and helping the mom come to an understanding of what her child was going through. In the end, the mom began asking Rain about the changes her child was undergoing and if she could contact Rain if she had any more questions. They closed the conversation with XXX, each of them. Rain had hope in a different future than the one we have come to begin to believe in from the world around us. That hope made a change possible in Rain's responses, and those responses led to a change in other people's lives, the lives of that mom and her vulnerable child. I pray that as we go deeper into this Advent, we can quiet, that the whole creation can, in the midst of our groans, still just long enough to hear a voice crying in the wilderness. There it is. A voice that points to new life emerging from dead places. A place of hope as we watch and we wait for the one who has something in mind for us that's bigger than any of us can ask or imagine.